Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I'm going to be quite brief. My arguments will be quite simple. They're going to go straight to Amendment 36. When the Right Honourable Member for Leeds Central stood up and spoke, I had a flash of déjà vu to the days when I cooperated with his father, thwarting the Blairite attempts to bypass Parliament some years ago. And it came back to me that he and I also shared a view on the European Union. We both knew it was undemocratic, both of us from ministerial experience, but also because we read our history. Monnet and Schuman designed it to be undemocratic, which is why we wanted to leave. So I come at this, and I say this to the Minister, given what was said before from the front bench, as a Brexiteer, a convinced Brexiteer, a campaigning Brexiteer. And what's more, just to remind the House, given the substance of this bill, I resigned from Cabinet to preserve the right to diverge from the European Union. So I actually agree with the aims of the bill, but I rather agree with the SNP spokesman about the effectiveness of it in those aims. Because looking at it, I voted and I campaigned to improve democracy. I wanted to take back control, to give it to Westminster, not to Whitehall. But that is what we've got. We've got Whitehall. Indeed, when the Minister was speaking earlier, she talked about the consultations. Consultations weren't with us. The consultations were with the Scottish Government, the Welsh Government, with departments of state. They weren't with us. And we are the people, at the end of the day, who are responsible for this. What's more, we are being asked here to sign a blank cheque. One might almost say a pig in a poke, because we do not know even how many pieces of legislation are going through on the back of this, let alone what they are. And that, of course, is not democratic. Now, we've heard the anoraks about this SI committee, this sifting committee, and so on. That is not the floor of this House. And these issues that we are talking about are sufficiently important. Some of them, not all of them. Some of them should go to an SI, but some of them really do deserve to come here. I'm just glancing down the list. Aviation safety, compensation rules, insider trading, protecting pensions payout when a company goes bust. I can't think of anything quite more significant to our members, our constituents than that. Preventing the trafficking of illegal weapons. These are substantive issues that need to come to us. I will give way.
I hesitate to stop him, but does he therefore agree with me? The fact that ministers have already unilaterally decided to revoke that piece of legislation that protects our constituents getting 50% of a pension pot if their company goes bust without any consultation with us, because they're going to use the powers in this bill simply to let it to be deleted, makes exactly his case as to why this is not democracy or taking back control.
30 seconds in making exactly that point. I agree with that. And of course, you know, Number 10 rushing this morning or last night to brief the papers and to write to us this morning saying we're not going to remove existing rights and protections, which is plainly not true. We're not going to impinge on environmental rights and so on, actually demonstrates what a great hole there is in the middle of this legislation. If it was covered in the law, we would not need to have that assurance, and all of the NGOs and so on. I don't agree with all of them, frankly, but all the NGOs who are concerned about this wouldn't have had to have their say either. Now, I'll give way, yes, of course.
I'm very grateful, because I too am very much in favour of parliamentary scrutiny and things being done properly, but everything that is being covered by this came in by a secondary measure, and therefore it is proportional. Primary legislation is not within the scope of this bill. If anything that came out of Europe came through in primary legislation, that will have to go through the floor of this House. So unless my right honourable friend is against secondary legislation altogether, I don't quite understand why he finds this bill so shocking.
But two wrongs don't make a right. The reason I did not like the European Union was precisely what he's just described. We had things almost de facto imposed upon us. Going through an SI type route to do things which I thought were important enough to justify discussion on the floor of this House. And the depletion of the floor of this House, in the years before he came to the Chamber mostly, the depletion of the floor of this House was one of the reasons I was a Brexiteer. Now, we have, of course, approached this in a different way in other respects. And the simple truth is, let us imagine it is 4,000 pieces of law, or regulations, or whatever. In truth, probably 90% of that may be clunky, may not work very well, but given that one thing in this bill which I approve of, which is the dealing with the superiority of European law, taking those priorities out of it, that's sensible. Once we've dealt with that, it will broadly work, and it doesn't justify a rush at this exercise. And let me explain what I think, very briefly, what I think the consequence of that will be. I said it's not democratic, but it's also going to be inefficient and possibly incompetent. And I give the House, as a demonstration of this, what we did on March the 23rd, 2020. You may remember, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that was the day we gave the government all sorts of powers under the Coronavirus Emergency Act. And look how many errors were made in governing the country in the next 6 months until we corrected that. If you don't bring a speaker to that dispatch box, if you don't bring a minister to that dispatch box to justify what he's doing, the quality of decision goes down. And that's dangerous when it's as important as these measures we're talking about here. The right approach, in my view, is the approach we've actually taken with some aspects of this. GDPR, we are rewriting under the a digital act. Solvency II and other financial measures we're rewriting under primary legislation. Some procurement work we're rewriting under primary legislation. We ought to be doing similar things with some other software elements and biomedical rules. That's the way to do it. Pick off the 10% or the 5% that really matter, that make 100% of the difference, and do that properly on the floor of this House, not by remote control on a ministerial diktat in an SI committee upstairs.